like I just went on vacation. I don't remember anything after 2 weeks, but then I kind of pop up this gigantic mind map. I zoom into it and I was like, okay, this was the file that I needed. This is the data. And then, you get into it and you just feel you're much quicker at doing things. You're much quicker at finding information. And people will also comment on that. So my supervisor like, oh my God, this is so organized. I've never seen anything like that. So it's no rocket science, just make notes and think them.
Welcome to the 73rd episode of the Struggling Scientist podcast. We are a podcast by scientists, for scientists, anybody science adjacent, and perhaps even hobbyists. My name is Susanne and I'm here with my co-host Jiren.
Hi.
As an academic, there are so many things you learn and want to remember. But keeping track of all of it and managing your acquired knowledge isn't easy. This is where a personal knowledge management system comes in. Or, in our case, an academic knowledge management system. But what does that look like? And how do you get started with it? Today, we're talking with our expert guest, Ilya Shabanov, who since starting his academic journey, has developed his academic knowledge management system, written over 300,000 words in it, and uses it to find connections in research he would otherwise have missed. Now he's sharing advice to help academics and researchers build their own academic knowledge management system and make their lives a little bit easier. So let's start. Welcome, Ilya. It's so nice to have you on our podcast today.
Hello. Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm actually very much indebted to you guys. You've helped me a lot in the past with my Twitter by retweeting things and having me as a guest author on your blog. So I learned a lot by doing this, and also it gave me a lot of traction. So thank you in so many ways.
Of course. So speaking of Twitter, you've actually been killing it quite a bit on Twitter with all your advice on both note-taking and academic knowledge management, especially for academics. And we thought you would be the perfect guest, an expert to have on this topic today. But before we get started talking about the details of academic knowledge management, we would love to know a little bit more about you. Could you maybe introduce yourself to our listeners? Who are you? What is your scientific background? And any interesting hobbies?
Yeah, gladly. So this is usually the question that takes up most of the time because I had everything in my life. Yes, my name is Ilya Shabanov. I'm doing a PhD in computational conservation ecology. Maybe you could call it like this. And my background is computer science, but I've also done some molecular biology and many other things. But just to kind of give an idea why am I doing things is because, most people, they try to go in depth. That's the general advice, do something really, really in depth. But I always try to do things in breadth. So always try to explore different things. So after I had my computer science degree, I started a business and did Neuronation. It's a brain training app. Then I didn't want to do this anymore. I went to an ashram and lived in India and learned yoga and meditation and Eastern philosophy. And I finished that, started my web design business and traveled the world as a digital nomad. Ended up homesteading in Arizona in the Sonoran Desert, completely failed. That was the COVID times. And then I decided, okay, I want to do something with academia. And I was 36 at this time. So so the hobby, if anything, is constant change, constant reinventing and kind of playing with my own mind. And the symbolism behind it is always the symbol of a pirate. And so the pirate is the freest of all individuals. And in the Pirates of the Caribbean, he always has this compass that points towards his greatest desire, not north or south. So I try to live my life that way, that I always try to go towards where my desire takes me. And so that's also how I ended up in academia by simply saying, okay, I tried all the engineering ways. I tried to be more of an artist, but academic is kind of somewhere in between. And I want to try this. So then finally I decided, okay, I'll go into academia. And that meant that I just volunteered instead of doing bachelor or master's or anything, because I started doing biology and I had absolutely no background in biology. And it was molecular biology. I was just lucky enough to find somebody who would be interested in tutoring me a little bit. So there's a professor in Arizona, also in the University of Arizona, Ross Buchan. And so he just said, okay, cool, you know nothing, and maybe you can do something cool. And he would teach me molecular biology, gave me this big book about it. And I learned a lot of yeast stuff and published a paper just 6 months later. It was more of a methods paper, so it was a lot of coding, which was good, because that's something that I already knew how to do, and we just added the microscopy and kind of the problems from molecular biology. that opened the doors to all kinds of PhDs or PhD programs. And unfortunately, I didn't get my US visa in time, so I couldn't go to the US, where I had 3 offers from 3 universities to do molecular biology. So instead, I ended up in New Zealand doing ecology. It's now what I'm doing, kind of trying to understand what are the main shifts of forests during climate change. So where do they go? Do they go uphill, downhill, further south, further north? And why is this happening? And can we actually predict that? So it's a fairly complicated big data topic.
Cool.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, quite a journey. I think it is the first time I heard like PhD and piracy and freedom in the same context. That was interesting. If you love the idea of building an academic knowledge system, but are, like me, not really looking forward to writing short summaries of the papers you want to save and keeping all of the information nicely stored together, our sponsor SciSummary can really help you out.
SciSummary is an amazing AI tool that not only helps you summarize academic papers in your favorite structure, it also adds the most important figures out of the paper directly to your summary and finds the keywords in the paper automatically, meaning you really have all the important information at a glance.
After the AI does a job, you have full editing potential and can ask it to focus more on the areas you want to save, making it the perfect summary for in your academic knowledge management system.
SciSummary has a free version for you to play around with, so try it out and test if it works for you. And if you love it as much as we do, you can get the pro version the first month for just $1 with the code FIRSTMONTH in all caps.
You can find it via thestrugglingscientist.com/SciSummary or via the link in the description.
And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Okay, so let's start with some of the important definitions. What is a personal knowledge management system? Or in the context of academia, what is an academic knowledge management system? And why is it important?
Yeah, so for me, I would say it's actually an evolution that doesn't start at personal knowledge management. It starts at just note taking. And in German, we have this word mitschreiben, which just literally translates to writing with, and intends like some flow of information, like a lecture, movie, presentation, something like that. That's what you start as, what you learn at school. You just make your notes, and usually those notes kind of just pile up. My analogy is, you have a shed in the backyard. You put all your shit in there. Yeah. So eventually it kind of piles up, and eventually you don't know what is in there. So that's what happens with general notes. I used Evernote back in the day, and I have hundreds and hundreds of notes. I don't know what's in there, but sometimes I find little gems. So then you realize, hey, actually it would be nice to do something with that stuff and not have it like just all messy in there, to have an overview what I have. So this is more personal knowledge management system, where you start organizing things, labeling things, and trying to add a little bit of structure on top. So you bring all that shit from the shed into your house, and you start labeling drawers and so on. So you know more of what you actually have. So your kind of known unknowns grow a little bit more. And then from there, you can actually say, okay, let's, instead of just storing that stuff, let's build something with it. So let's create an argument with all this knowledge. Let's create coherent thought. So PKM does it, like personal knowledge management does it to an extent, but in academic knowledge management, this is the main goal. It's the synthesis of information. So when I do my webinars and ask people, what is your main problem? Over 80% say it's synthesis of information, because there's just too much information to put in the brain and let the subconscious mind synthesize it. So you have to offload it. You have to have this external hard drive with all your information, but you need a structure and a system to access it efficiently. Like this USB port between your hard drive and your computer, that's what you want to establish. So that is the system. And this can have many, many different ways. But essentially, it has 3 main challenges. So one is always keeping track of your sources. And so it's just that you can't say anything in your paper that does not have a source. So in personal knowledge management, this is kind of irrelevant. I heard the quote, whether it's Oscar Wilde or somebody else, like, I don't really care. There's like something written there, but I won't have any negative effects usually if I misquote it somehow. Oops, I made a mistake. Academia, it's a hard pass if you do this. So then the other option is this massive scale. The PKM is personal, so people do it more as a hobby maybe. But if you do it 8 hours a day for 12 months in a year, then obviously you accumulate much, much more knowledge than you would in a personal setting. So that also poses a big limitation on how you manage your informations. And then the last thing for me is at least to integrate some sort of media into it. So PDFs, annotations, like all that stuff that is important. It's usually not so present in PKMs. Maybe one last thing is the management, the knowledge management part, which also becomes project management, because I have an idea in academia. Okay, I want to achieve this. I want to answer this research question. How do I accomplish it? The business advice is usually, break down your task and then do it. The problem with academia is that 90% of the tasks lead to absolutely nowhere. Like you do it for absolutely nothing and you just waste your time. And so you kind of get frustrated with organizing everything and creating tasks and so on. So you just let it be. But in academia, you actually have to keep track of also what didn't work and why it didn't work. That's a part of project management you usually don't hear in business publications, how do you Scrum and Agile development and so on. So you don't do this. So yeah, it's quite a kind of, I feel it's an evolution from PKM, but not necessarily that it's better. It just serves a little bit of a different person. It's PC8s.
Okay, fair. But I also think so for a lot of our audience and also just a lot of academics in general who may hear this and think of it maybe more of as a fancier version of note-taking. I know a lot of academics who they scribble down some notes in their journals or their books at a conference, for example, but then sort of completely forget about it the moment the conference is gone. They never check it ever again. And sort of have more of an approach of if it's important, it'll just pop up again, or they'll find it, or if they need it or something like that. Sort of more of a, it'll come back to me if it's really important. Is that one way that thinking about note-taking and sort of academic knowledge management would be different? That there's more of a clear thought, sort of you're approaching it more as an architect, building your system that you can synthesize something versus note-taking, or are there more differences as well?
So I'll give you an analogy for that. So imagine you are standing here and there's a sea around you. You see the horizon. So certain things are really close to you. You know that you know them. Certain things are really far on the horizon. You see there's something there, but you can't really know what it is. So it's something that's unknown, but you know that it's there. And then there is this vast information behind the horizon. So now if you are static, if you're standing, the information behind the horizon will always stay behind the horizon. You can't really access it. And so if in terms of knowledge, if you want to access these unknown unknowns, you have to start moving. So, and to start moving, you need to connect your nodes somehow, because you jump from node to node. And so you have to create a system of bridges, so to speak, so that you can start moving around in your space, so that you see behind the horizon. When you take nodes, those nodes are essentially disconnected. They're connected in your head, but if you don't know the node is there, there's no connection anymore. Same with notebooks. It's really hard to connect physical nodes. The only person that actually did this was Niklas Luhmann with his famous Zettelkasten or slipbox thing, where he would put little indices like 1C, 4BF, and that would mean that he has to go to another box, draw it out, pull out the little card, and then have some sort of information that links to this one. It was very, very complicated. He had a whole cupboard filled with these things, 90,000 notes. Very cryptic also when you look at them. The academic or any sort of really knowledge management system needs to have a way to move around your nodes, to navigate around your nodes. And if you don't have that, then you don't really have a system, you have a pile, right? And the more sophisticated the system gets, the more possibilities you have to navigate. So in Obsidian, this note-taking software that I'm using, you can use just links just on the internet. You know that clicking a link gets you to a new website, but you can also look at graphs. So you can just zoom out and see 100 nodes at the same time, how they're connected, what they connect with. You can also create mind maps and connect things in the way that you think is right, and so on. So you get more and more different, more complex ways of navigating, of walking around. So to come back to our analogy, we can, swim around, we can have a boat, we can walk around, we can fly around, and all these different methods, they have limitations, but they also have advantages. And so very often I think people get stuck in exploring the modes of motion rather than where they move in and what they are observing. So kind of missing the view in front of the tech.
Okay. Now, we already mentioned that you have quite an advanced academic knowledge management system at this point. Can you name some examples of when this really helped you, and how did this help you?
Yeah. So this is a thing that I will also answer you with an analogy. So let's say you come to a party and you bring really fresh, nice vegetables to, and this and it's like, oh wow, that's really the best cucumber I ever had. But how do I know where you got this cucumber? So this is the same cucumber. You could get it at the supermarket. You could have gotten it from your own garden. But to me, it will feel much different to get it from my own garden, and the kind of the connection to this cucumber that I have, and the value of this cucumber will be higher because I know exactly what went into it. And so with an academic knowledge management system, you kind of have a garden of your knowledge and you farm your knowledge. So you get much more knowledge than somebody who always has to go to the supermarket and Google it, so to speak. And that happens for me quite regularly. So if I, for example, it happens over topics. So there's a topic, let's say in climate change, and I write down that climate change causes fluctuations in the temperature. So just like that, temperature is increasing, that's the last thing, but it's actually more the fluctuation that is problematic. And so that happens 6 months ago. So now I'm researching how do plants grow. So the main thing that modulates plant growth is temperature. So now, of course, I know temperature and climate change are somehow related. So maybe those nodes are related. And maybe I navigate to the node on climate change and there I see, fluctuation is actually the main thing. So how does fluctuation affect plant growth? So that's a new question that I just created from there. And turns out a lot, because fluctuation means drought, means fire, means flood, and so on. So these things, they are really destructive disturbances to plant life, and they modulate plant behavior or plant dynamics in a much different way than just a slight increase in temperature, because they can destroy whole forests, and then they don't regrow ever, or maybe in 500 years. So I get immediately a new way of thinking. But that thinking might not be so surprising, because when I tell this to you, you feel like, okay, that's just a regular cucumber. This is just exactly what I would think it is. But you would not have this idea at the moment. And then this is kind of a simple analogy, but these analogies get more and more complex because you have hundreds and thousands of nodes that are all connected. And every time I discover also something, because in my system, I would put the source to it. So the source to the paper, and the paper has the PDF. So in about 1.5 seconds, I can have the PDF already open and read the abstract and look through the figures and so on. So that means I can very quickly probe down deep into some topic in just a few seconds, realize, that's probably good, that's probably not so good. While somebody else would have to Google that, like really break out of their flow of thought and to come back to it, then you have to again like read, I was talking about plants, I was talking about plant growth and so on. But here you don't really break the flow. So it becomes an experience of also just like a pleasure to it, because you're navigating this flow of information in this with the sense of flow. And so that happens all the time. And I call these are like little surprises to myself. I have nodes that are really so old, I don't even remember I have them, but sometimes it shows up that this node links to something related. Like you can have backlinks, for example. You know what nodes link to your node. And that is something that, you have basically no control over. Some other node you made 6-9 months ago links to something that you're working on now, and you discover it right now. You don't click anywhere, you discover it. So these would be all examples of how that works. And maybe another example is also I use it, like my knowledge system a lot to document my research questions, findings, and the code that led to all the graphs that I generate. And this code is so complex. Like I just went on vacation. I didn't remember anything after 2 weeks, but then I kind of pop up this gigantic mind map. I zoom into it and I was like, okay, this was the file that I needed. This is the data. And then, you get into it and you just feel you're much quicker at doing things. You're much quicker at finding information, and people will also comment on that. And the supervisor like, oh my God, this is so organized. I've never seen anything like that. So it's no rocket science, just make notes and think them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm interested because now you've clearly made the case for why academic knowledge management is important, but also beneficial to the person using it. But have you come across some common pitfalls or things people really struggle with when trying to set up their own academic knowledge management system?
Yeah, capitalism. So and materialism that results from that. What people always think is they have a thing, and that thing is what they own. So very often you look at a template and it looks like you own that template that does something for you. But the thing is, it really doesn't do anything for you. It's like a different view on the world. What really does something for you is the connections in your vault. Those connections are immaterial, right? They are not, you don't own your friends. Like, it's the relationship to your friend that really counts. And that's the same here. That's the relation between the nodes that counts, and you can only build that over time. So most people, they will try to do a few nodes, and they will, end up with like a pile again, because you don't necessarily know how, and you don't take the time to experiment. And nothing happens. It's like just, it's like when you're in a garden, you buy the fanciest soil, the fanciest fertilizer, put it there, but your plants won't grow faster. They will grow stronger maybe eventually, but you still have to put the effort and time to actually grow your content, your information. Only then will you start being like, oh my God, this is awesome. I really get a lot out of working with my system here. So most people won't stick long enough. That's what I find. Most people also don't know necessarily how. So digital note-taking tools are a little bit, I don't know, people say you can remember things better when you write them down, which is probably true. But on the long run, I can remember things better if I have them in a digital note. And it takes me longer to create the digital note as compared to just a scribble. So that's a little bit of a trade-off. So you have to kind of go through this valley first, and then you will get to the peak. And that will take time. And then when you're in the valley, when you're struggling, you're like, oh my God, it will be so nice. That template will probably solve it. That tool will probably solve it. And this is the temptation. So that temptation is what leads you astray, because then you start a new system, a new tool, all your connections are again gone. It's the equivalent of moving to a new city, because you say, my friends suck, I don't have friends, I'll move to a new city. Well, you have less friends initially and less connections. You'll start to build them from scratch again. That's what I think is the biggest thing, really. It's not so much of a technical thing. It's just, make links. 90% of what you need is just make excessive links to your content and think about what relates to what. Everything else is on top. It'll get you farther, but the links are the absolute bread and butter. That's your legs if you want to locomote.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely get back to what tools are useful. But an important thing about academia is also the ability to collaborate and share knowledge with others, especially when writing a manuscript, for example. Do you think there is also a place for this in an academic knowledge system, or is that something you should keep separate?
I think that it's something that you actually would keep separate, because it's a personal thing, right? So if you have your desk, you're sitting at your desk, you put the things that you use at your desk the way you use them. Maybe you write with your right hand, maybe I write with my left hand. So, you'll put the pen on the right, I'll put it on the left. So if we start sharing this table, this pen will be all over the place. It will be kind of messy. And I feel like with knowledge management system, there's not a pen, there's like a billion pens that you put in a very precise way. To start to sharing it would only make sense if you make it a read only. So it's your knowledge management, or your knowledge vault, and you share it with somebody, and they can just look things up. So I think that has a space there. But if you start collaborating, let's say, on a manuscript, then there are better tools for that. Yeah? Like even Google Docs, I had like all this commenting. Like I tried this in Notion to do that, but we somehow always reverted back to let's just use Word and send it around. Like the technology, just how much edits and how these edits are presented, and tracking changes, it just works better in like a tool that is made as a word processor and not as a note-taking tool. But yeah, I think it's possible for simple things, but I personally think should be more read-only, because it's really my personal academic thing, so I don't want to share it. It's very, very intimate. It's an extension of my own mind, of my brain. So if you probably see colors differently, you probably hear voices differently than I do, but I couldn't tell. But if I were in your head, it would probably all be really weird.
No, fair. So I think, how should I put this? So I think you've made the case really well for academic knowledge management and why it's important and stuff like that. But how can you tell if your academic knowledge management system is serving you well, working well? Do you need to optimize it still? Are there any sort of benchmarks or indicators for that you can use as someone who's still maybe optimizing your own or trying to set up your academic knowledge management system, that you can see like, okay, at least I'm on the right path, but it can be better or something like that?
So Jaron, do you ride a bike?
Funny story, actually, right now, no. But I used to.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, so that's the question I would ask you, like, how do you know that you're good at bike riding? So
By riding the bike, I guess.
yeah, sort of, it's really hard to tell. It's a subtle thing. So maybe, you go a little bit faster, maybe you don't fall as often, maybe you're more daring. I don't know, maybe you can ride without your hands. So that's the same thing. Like, when does note taking, when are you really done with note taking? It's the same as when are you good at bike riding? I don't think that's something that you will, something like a checkbox. But for me personally, it's the ease of use. It's the pleasure that I get out of the thing. It's the same with cooking. Like, when are you good at cooking? Sure, it has to taste good, but a lot of things taste actually good. But like, you have to enjoy the cooking process. You have to really love it. And if you get to this point, then you know that it's working for you, because then the ideas of how to improve your system, they will come automatically. Because your thing, once you start enjoying it, it becomes alive. And once it becomes alive, it starts evolving, and it gets its own ideas of how it wants to move according to your needs and desires. So this is where you feel like you really arrive, because the experimenting never really stops. Like, you still begin initially experimenting a lot. You're really hot, you flow a lot, you move a lot, but then you start to cool down and to settle in this optimum, this local optimum of your notes, and this is the system that you use. But every once in a while, you'll say, let's just do it afresh. Let's try something new. And so in my world, I have 3, 5, 10 different systems living side by side, just like in a real world. You have some sort of animal that is fossil, essentially, from the dinosaur age, but you also have something that only very recently evolved, and all of them coexist together, and that's also totally fine. So your system will be really more of a dynamic network of interacting agents, which are the nodes and strategies that you use, and it will be much, much more alive than you would think of it. So it's not a database, it's actually a living organism. Just like a forest is more than the part of the different trees, it's an ecosystem that does much, much more than just CO2 to sugar conversion. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. We're getting back to the tools, actually. So you need basically a tool that is capable of making all these connections and keeping it organized and lets you search through it. Which ones do you recommend for making an academic knowledge management system?
Yeah, that's a bit of a trick question, because I always tell people that a good carpenter doesn't blame her tools or their tools, because it really doesn't matter. You can use pretty much anything. So I use Obsidian. It's a free software. It's private. It's local. It's super fast. It's mature enough to have enough plugins to pretty much do whatever I want. But it requires sometimes a little bit of hacking. So not hacking, but it feels a little bit like you're working on Linux instead of a Mac. And that's fine for me, because I'm fine with technology. I have a computer science background. I'm not afraid of that, but I can see how that can be intimidating and can also be really impeding to your process. So other people will say, no, Notion is actually better. It's prettier, it's easier to share, and so on. I, on the other hand, think Notion is far too slow for me. So whenever I type something and I want to find something, it takes me 3-4 seconds instead of 1 second. That really annoys me. So I don't know, like, maybe it's just me. But so pick one tool that you really like and, experiment. I had Evernote, I had Notion, I had Obsidian. So I did a little bit of experimentation. And the other thing is, in terms of reference management, so people say, okay, you can use Zotero, Mendeley, and so on. I use neither. So I say, as much as you can, use one tool for everything. And you can actually build your own reference manager in Obsidian by just putting your papers in, but you have your summary there, you have all your links to the paper, you have your PDF, everything is in there. While Zotero is only for papers, and then you have something only for notes, and then you have something only for your calendar entries. So it becomes difficult to connect those things, and we said that it's about connection, right? So the more connections you have, the more knowledge you actually have. It's not so much the items, but it's the connections between them. So use a single software and try to really stick to it, and do not jump to any shiny templates, because there are always many. Unless you're starting out fresh, then you can pick the shiniest template, because it's really up to you where you start. But these are my main tools, honestly, Obsidian. And if you want to synthesize big amounts of knowledge, then use some sort of graphical visualization things. So I use diagrams.net or Draw.io. This is an open source, simple software that just allows you to draw boxes of different colors and connect them with arrows. But you can make the boxes and arrows in many different ways. So it's very versatile. And that means that I can build this gigantic networks of different things. So if you think about molecular biology, you have processes, you have non-coding RNA floating around, you have proteins floating around, and all of these things affect somehow. And this is the whole idea of proteomics, is to understand how they interact. But now, how do you actually put it as a knowledge graph? And you can do that by creating different nodes and saying, okay, this is protein so and so, and under this condition it connects to this and this. And then, interesting thing is, like, whenever you have a connection, protein X does function B, you actually write the name of the paper on the connection, because that's what it is. The paper, the new knowledge contribution, is the connection between the two. It's not that the protein is there. Everybody knows it's there. So some sort of visualization software where you can annotate those links is really useful. And just a very well connected vault of knowledge.
But you would say that for somebody starting out, the minimum you need is a database and tags to each node.
I would say the minimum is just something that can link things together. The tags is kind of a meta link, if you want, because the tag is a node in itself, and then it links to two nodes if you want them. So it's kind of adds more complexity.
That's why I was mostly, we work with Notion, and I was mostly wondering what you use in Notion then to link them together, because I know about the tags, but can you actually link them?
Yeah, you can backlink.
Oh, okay.
Okay. You can links and backlinks. So when you link from A to B, and then you look at the node for B, you see the backlink to A. So that backlink kind of happens automatically. And so whenever you get to the node of B, like, there's nothing mentioning A, but if you look at the backlink, suddenly you see, hey, A, this is a concept that links to it. And that is where those surprises happen, because now you get a free link, you get a free connection that you didn't think of. So links, in my understanding, are the best way, because what you can do is, instead of creating a tag, create a node. And you can name the node exactly like the tag. And then inside this node, start linking all the different related concepts that kind of would be tagged by that. And now you can add a little bit, not only the links, but you actually add a little bit of context. So A does B under this and this conditions, and this person found it out. So essentially, you're creating an outline with a lot of links. That outline, even though it replaces your tag, it very quickly becomes something that you can just plug and play into your publication, because it becomes a mini literature review on all the notes that you would normally tag with that thing. But if you just tag them, then you have 20 notes. What do you do with them? They don't have context. But with a text and a note, it's better. That's why I say links are actually the essential. They're really the foot soldiers of this whole army.
Okay. So I'm actually interested in this because, you mentioned you've used Notion before and then you switched to Obsidian. So how important is it actually to sort of pick and sort of hopefully have the right tool that you can get started with already, and try to optimize that as you go along? Like, as you mentioned, Obsidian has a lot of plugins that you can sort of hack it to make it do what you want. But so how important is it to pick the right tool at the beginning and know when maybe this tool isn't doing it for you, it doesn't have the right speed or the right features that you actually would want or need eventually? But as you mentioned, the longer you spend with a tool, the more links you start making, the harder it can actually be to switch, because you're going to maybe lose all that information that you worked so hard on.
So analogy answer. Let's say you are a Chinese chef. So you're really used to cook with those gigantic cleavers and chopsticks and wok, and then actually the food turns out really, really good. I can't complain. Or let's say you're a French chef, which has the knife is a little bit more pointy at the end, and you use knife and fork and spoons, and you don't have a wok. So which one is better, right? Which one should you pick at the beginning to cook food? Because you're interested in cooking food and making notes and so on. The thing is, I don't think it really matters so much as people think it would. Because again, this is focusing on the material. but it matters in the sense that you will grow out maybe of a tool and grow into something else. So luckily there are now things or migration plugins. So Obsidian just recently introduced, like you can import from Notion, you can import from Evernote and so on. So you can bring your knowledge. I don't know if it's easy to do the other way around. Usually those big commercial tools, they don't care to import the little open source tools, but the other way around works well. You could start with something bigger, like Notion or Evernote, and then make the switch to something more niche and nuanced and harder to use, so to speak, like Obsidian or Logseek or Rome Research, God forbid. So that would be my understanding, but it really does not matter so much. You'll be fine with all the tools. You'll be fine with whatever you choose to. It's more your skill and your perseverance in using that tool. And just like the Chinese chef gets the Michelin star and the French chef gets the Michelin star, both of them get their paper out.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the reason I ask is also because I started using Notion, and I never used any sort of note-taking app before. And ever since starting using Notion and really doubling down over the couple of years and making databases and stuff like that and trying to link stuff together, I saw some of the benefits indeed. But now it's also, I feel like trying to switch out of Notion or try anything else is hard, just because all those connections, all that difficult, more this maybe Notion specific features would not migrate along with the notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what I do is I usually have some sort of small personal side projects, and then I just experiment with some new note-taking app to get a feel for it. But yeah, that's absolutely the case. Even now, if I use Notion, I feel like, that's like so frustrating to have like all these right-click things, and just want to type Markdown. For me, it's easy.
Yeah, because I can imagine, because I think with Evernote, it hasn't really gotten a lot of updates in the last couple of years or something like that. So if you got started in the early days with Evernote, then it probably hasn't kept up with stuff like Notion or Obsidian or stuff like that. So it's sort of, when should you consider then okay, maybe time to leave Evernote or something like that?
Yeah, I think whenever you can't really do something that is really important. When you notice that every time you need to switch to a different app to accomplish something, for example, PDF annotations. So how do you do PDF annotations? You can put the PDF there, but you can't really make annotations in it. So in Obsidian, you could, with a plugin, you could make annotations. And the cool thing is you can even link to these annotations. So when I have a link and say this paper says it, I hover over something and a little box comes out with the exact quote of that PDF. And with the newest feature, you can even, the whole PDF pops out and tells you everything in context. So that's pretty cool. It's that important, but I don't think there is a right time to really switch. The right time is always now if you're lacking something, and it is never if you don't lack something. So yeah, for me, I did for molecular biology, I started to do one thing, and then it just got too messy. It was kind of very slow. It was slowing me down. Then I said, okay, well, I switched to Obsidian. It was really, really good, but it was still very messy. And then with ecology, I kind of stuck to Obsidian, but restarted everything from scratch. And I did it 2 or 3 more times until I got it right. So I think again, think of a garden. When is the right time to harvest? When is the right time to switch crops? These are not questions that you can just answer. These are questions you have to feel in your environment. And just by using them, you will know. Your feeling will know. You'll learn enough things so that your heart will tell you, okay, this is the right thing to do, or your guts, whatever you think with. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of the future, where or how do you see academic knowledge fitting in with all the new AI tools that are coming out? And are they compatible? Would they work together?
Yeah, I was actually experimenting. So just last week, this custom GPTs came out, and this was a great thing, because now you can upload your knowledge and have the AI work on that knowledge. And there were plugins for Obsidian that would use a little bit of your notes to use AI on them and have the AI have this as a background information, but it didn't really work so well. So I was just okay, I don't care about this. But now with the custom GPTs, it actually works pretty good. And also the context window is so long So what I did, I exported all my notes on a certain topic and put it as a background information, and then said, okay, well, this is what I want you to do, and I want you to analyze all my research questions that are in the notes, and I want you to kind of critically contrast this paper that I'm giving you with this research question. So will this paper help me answer A, B, C, D, or E? And then, give me answers why. And so I created this bot where you just drag and drop a PDF, and it tells you exactly whether or not this paper is more or less relevant for your for your things. And this is pretty cool. Yeah. Another use case that I found is that I could just take all the abstracts of all the papers that I've read in Zotero, just hit export if you're using Zotero, and upload it, and then have the AI basically search for papers. Very often you're like, oh, this paper, I know it dealt with some plants in Australia, and I think it was maybe also something about animals. So you can ask that in this way, and it will find the paper because it knows the abstract, all the abstracts. So that is still a little bit inconvenient because you have to upload it. It doesn't sync all the time. But the step to syncing your notes all the time and having the AI suggest ideas is really not that far off. So now you have little plugins that will tell you, okay, this note is linked to A, B, C, and D, but it could also be linked to X, Y, and Z. And so they analyze your vault and they suggest links that are missing. So they suggest essentially pieces of information that might make sense or new questions that you haven't asked. So all of that, I think, will really, really be incredibly important. And it will be especially for people that use digital notes. They won't be able to do this easily on paper. You can scan and stuff. But digital notes and AI, they will go greatly together because you have vast amounts of text with very complicated, very linked connections. And then you get into, the vastness, like the power of AI to be able to analyze all of that at once. What it can't do at the moment is to understand the importance of links. So it doesn't, it's just text. But if we could somehow program this importance of links into it so that how close concepts are related together, not only through text and understanding, but actually through links, then I think it will become really an absolute game changer for academics. All you need to do is then take notes, and the ideas happen more or less by the AI, and you just gauge those ideas. Are they good? Are they bad?
Okay. Maybe to continue on sort of the AI tools and academic knowledge management direction a little bit. Where do you see academic knowledge management actually in the future evolving with these AI tools maybe, or what innovations or trends have caught your eye recently? You mentioned custom GPTs coming out just last week. Is there anything else you're like hoping for, like a feature that maybe no other thing has yet that you would really want to see?
Yeah, I think that it will be more than just knowledge management. It will manage more things. So what I do now, for example, I also manage some of my data. So I can throw in files in there, and I can link those files also around. So I don't have just folders. Now I have it all part of my knowledge system linked in many different ways. That could be one thing, that you could integrate code and data and everything that you're using into this. Then obviously things like calendars, meetings, that also you can do to an extent now, but it's not very convenient, not very smooth. So once it gets smoother, it becomes really like a secretary type of thing that knows things that you don't even know, you don't even remember, and just keeps resurfacing ideas. But AI will definitely be one of the biggest things. If that gets integrated with the notes in a really smooth way, this will be a major game changer. And I'm not speaking of like generative AI that can create text or summarize text, like all of that is more or less a gimmick, maybe gimmick is a bit overstated, but it's not as impactful to your daily life as you would want it to be. While making sense, and the synthesis idea, that is something that would be really a game changer. So I think that's integrating also things like videos or voice messages would be really cool. If I could just have a little thing, speak a voice message, which immediately be integrated into my vault in the exact same place. What I do now is when I go on a run, I have my phone, maybe I type in a small Google Note or Google Keep note, and then I come back and basically have to manually transfer these ideas into my vault. So that could be much, much easier. Yeah, just this, in terms of smoothness, things will evolve. Yeah. Just like the internet was very niche, very ugly, clunky, slow, and now it's everywhere and you can do anything with it. So that's a little bit the ideas that I think will happen.
Okay, sounds awesome. Last question already. Do you have any last advice for anybody who is listening to this episode and is thinking, I also want my own academic knowledge management system?
Well, I like analogies. So I say, remember that you are the gardener of your knowledge. You have to place it in this right soil and you have to tend for it and care for it and make sure that the environment is conducive to do it. If you see it this way, then your nodes will really start flourishing for you because they do most of the work. You just get obstacles out of the way. So I always think of this as a gardener, and the main attribute that the gardener has is patience. So if you're patient, then things will happen, and they will happen by themselves. So don't really despair and just do it, and don't ask the question why all the time, and don't fret about that it's difficult. Just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. Rinse off, rinse on, rinse off, like in Karate Kid. And then eventually you'll become the Kung Fu master.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ilya, for coming on the podcast today and talking with us about academic knowledge management. We really loved having you on and discussing this topic. If people would like to find you, get in touch with you, learn more about academic knowledge management, where can they do so?
My website is called the effortlessacademic.com. So just visit the website, effortlessacademic.com. And you'll find my Twitter links, my blog links. You'll find a free 7-day course on note-taking where I basically introduce you how to start with Obsidian. And then, of course, I have a bunch of courses that are more in-depth and run webinars a couple times a year. So whenever time permits. So effortlessacademic.com.
Okay.
Nice.
For our listeners, if you have any questions, suggestions, or comments, you can reach out to us via our website, thestrugglingscientist.com. You can also check out our website to sign up for the awesome Journal of the Struggling Scientist, also known as our newsletter. And if you have enjoyed this episode, then leave us a rating on your favorite podcast listening platform, as it helps us grow and reach more struggling scientists. You can also follow us on social media. Jadon, which ones are those again?
X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and also YouTube.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.